Live now, Chair.
Thank you, Luciani. Good evening, everybody, members, officers, and members of the public who may be watching this on YouTube. This is the meeting of Woking Borough Council's Licensing and Appeals Committee, Tuesday, the 9th of March 2021. A few housekeeping things before we begin. This is a virtual meeting, and this is allowed under the Coronavirus 2020 legislation. The meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel, as I said. Only members of the Licensing and Appeals Committee and relevant officers will speak at the meeting. Please mute your microphone when not speaking and turn on the microphone and camera when you are speaking. Can you, members, please use the hands up function to indicate you want to speak? And I think I can follow you on if you do that in the correct order as well, I hope. And can you also use the hands up facility to make decisions, recommendations, so we get through the agenda. The procedure is that officers will be asked to present their reports. Then members will be invited to ask questions or make comments using the hands up function, and then officers will use the hands up function to answer questions. So with that, we go to the agenda, and I think it's apologies on the agenda. Apologies for absence, I think. Apologies for absence, please. Yeah, any apologies?
No, I have not received any apologies.
Excellent. That's very good. Agenda item 20, minutes of the previous meeting. Members, any comments?
Sorry, Chris, there are two from my side. I thought they had sent it in.
Oh, I'm missing people.
But both Paul Fishwick and Rochelle Shepherd-Bay give their apologies as a Winnish Parish Council tonight.
I understand. Okay. So just two apologies for absence.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay. Minutes of the previous meeting. Members, do you have any comments on the minutes of the meeting held on 10th of November last year? No. Agenda item 21 is declarations of interest. Any member have a declaration of interest? No. Public question time. Do we have any public questions, Luciani?
No, we haven't received any public questions.
Any member questions?
No.
Thank you. So the first substantive item is taxi and private hire fee consultation response. Over to you, Sean, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. In fact, Julie is going to start the presentation on this one, and I'll be available to assist with any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Go ahead, Julie, please.
Yes, members, this is to look at the responses for the fee consultation, which, as you recall, you considered at the last meeting in November last year. So it was agreed at that meeting to proceed with the statutory consultation process of any objections or reservations received that they're brought back to this committee. So in your papers, you have the responses that we received during the consultation period, which ran from the, ran until the 25th of February. So the three responses are attached to the bundle at the back for you to have a look at. In the main, I'm sure it won't be a surprise, but the responses we received were essentially that there were objections to the fee increase. These consisted of two individual representations and one that was said to be on behalf of the remaining Hackney carriage drivers, although there was no indication on who that may be or how many members of that association there may be. The feedback is in appendices B and C, and over to members, please.
Thank you, Julia. I only have one hand up at the moment, and that's Rachel. Rachel, would you like to put your point?
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I mean, this committee, as Julia said, agreed the fees and charges to go forward for consultation in November. So that was 4 months ago. So I don't understand why we're reviewing the responses to this consultation now, because is it not the case that the fees and charges have actually been agreed by Executive and Council as part of the budget setting process? So I don't understand why the taxi drivers weren't consulted after our meeting in November, so that any changes could then be reviewed by us, say, in January, and then input through to the budget process. But instead, the consultation actually ended after Budget Council. So could one of the officers explain the timing of that to me, please?
Sean, perhaps?
Yes, Chair. So obviously they came to the meeting in November. Now, obviously, unusually Woking is different in its budget setting cycle to a lot of authorities who set their fees and charges in March. The fees, in fact, were set through executive and through council in December of 2020. Going back to the substantial point that Councillor Burgess said, I mean, we have had this situation before where the decision, basically having considered the recommendation or considered the consultation responses, basically the committee has recommended that we go back and review the fees that have already been set, and we have done that in the past when we did basically made a decision as an authority to provide that 2-year subsidy. So although the fees have been set basically already, there is the possibility of taking this back basically for further consideration depending on the outcome of this committee tonight. Councillor Burgess.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I appreciate what you say. I still think that if the consultation had happened earlier, it would fit in a lot better with the decision-making process instead of reviewing it essentially after the event.
I agree. I see what you're saying in effect, because effectively by the time the decision was made in November, I think when the meeting, I can't remember the exact date of the last meeting, but it would have been in any case too late to have had a full consultation with the trade at that point, come back to the committee basically for further consideration of those responses, and still got it into the cycle for the fee setting process in December. So it is an unusual process in the sense that you're considering the responses after the fees have been set, but it's not unprecedented, and there would be the ability, I suspect, to take it away after tonight's meeting should the committee hold a different view, and I will raise that then obviously with the relevant executive member who is also on the committee in any case as to what they want to do with that as an authority.
Okay,
I'll take your point. I'll take your point. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really important that our consultations are seen to be genuine and not just a tick box.
Yeah.
And I think one of the respondents already says that they don't think it will make any difference. And with the timing, I sort of see what they mean. But I understand what you're saying. Just one more point, if I may, Chair. Just leading on from that. So we all know that taxi incomes have plummeted. So I don't think we should be expecting taxi drivers to accept a rise in their fees. They were clearly expecting a drop in the fees as they haven't been able to do their job essentially. So I would propose that the taxi driver fees are reviewed and that a cut to the fees is proposed either for the forthcoming year or some sort of discount applied retrospectively for last year. I don't know how they're supposed to sort of afford these fees when some of them are using food banks and are really struggling. That the last point on that, I would just say, don't forget that just 3 years ago that the fees, say for a Hackney carriage, were £157. They're now expected to be 290. So it's almost doubled across that period. And I know we've given something back to them in terms of phasing in that increase, but it is a big increase over that period. And with what they've been through, I think we should be really looking at this and proposing a cut to the fees or some sort of discount.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. You happy that we have followed the legal requirement to consult on this, even though the timing is a little awkward. So that is okay. That's legal, and we are proceeding in the correct way. Okay, let me come to next, Sarah Kerr. Sarah, good evening.
Thank you very much. Hi. I actually was going to make some of the points that Rachel made, and just on that last point, it might have followed the correct legal process, but that doesn't necessarily make it right. And I would hope that given the challenges this year, this will be addressed for future years to make sure the consultation is done well in advance so that it can be inputted into the decision-making process before the decision's actually made. And I also do want to echo what Rachel said about, I just don't see how we can put an increase to these taxi drivers at the moment who are really struggling. And I would second what Rachel has said already, something I was going to propose anyway. So I'd second that. I just don't think it's the right time to be doing this.
Well, the proposal is to cover costs, of course, isn't it? And the council does have other facilities for helping businesses who are in difficulties during the COVID period and have indeed done that. I wonder whether that is rather a better mechanism than reducing the increase here?
Well, what would be interesting to know is how the number of taxi drivers have approached and been given actual assistance. I know that certainly with other industries, there are so many gaps within the financial provision that there is for people through COVID at the moment. So I don't see that as necessarily solving the problem. At the end of the day, finances are hard for everybody, but we've got a particular industry here that is really, really struggling to do an increase at the moment. It is just sending out completely the wrong message, I'm afraid. So we need to find a way of. I understand from the report that because the decision has been made on the fees, we could be looking at subsidising in the meantime, and I would very much support us doing something like that, please.
Lindsay. I'm sorry, can we come back to Sean? Sean has his hand up. He may want to respond to what
I was only going to say, Chair, that going back to the point that Councillor Kerr has made, I think the point, in terms of the point and the explanation on the fees, that is correct. So I mean, effectively, we came here back in November, didn't we, with a proposed fee, which was effectively just an inflationary rise on the previous fee, which took I think a vehicle fee up by, Julia will correct me if I'm wrong, by £2. So it was just primarily an inflationary rise. What we're saying really is the fee is the fee. So anything beyond this point, as Councillor Kerr has pointed out, basically is a proposal to effectively subsidise that fee from this committee. So a proposal by the committee, sorry, to effectively subsidise that fee if that's the decision that you arrive at today. Clearly, if any decision like that is taken, obviously we'll take that away and feed that back into the system.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Lindsay.
Thank you. Both speakers have beaten me to what I wanted to say, and that is I don't think we can put anything up. I've spoken to a number of the taxi drivers, and some have been furloughed, but the vast majority are self-employed and seem to be in that category that's sort of fallen through a big gap. So it's actually very difficult for quite a lot of them to have got any business. And the group that's usually down Twyford Station, I haven't seen for the last 3 months because there's been absolutely no business there at all. So I think we have a particular issue with taxi drivers, along with some other parts of our economy, who have been particularly badly impacted. And as Sarah just said, we have an opportunity at this committee to decide whether we can subsidise, and the recommendation that I think Sarah's just put is that we do not put them up. I think we would need to subsidise that element above, because I think if we were to provide an extra charge on them, I think we could end up that we would get 0% of the increase, because a lot of them will go, and a number have actually told me that they have re-registered and gone into Reading. So we might find that we could try and in theory get extra money because we've got the cost of doing it and everything, but in reality we could find that we've got a significantly, or certainly a number of taxi drivers who are no longer operating in our borough. So I think we need to be very cognizant on that, and I think that what we need to propose, and I think it's been proposed and seconded already, that we need to make sure that we do not provide this increase. And on the issue of timing, I know there's a lot of review going on about the whole of this area, but I would make sure, Sean, that we were looking at going on the process of reviewing things at least 3 months earlier, so that we are in a position to actually have an input at the time a decision's made, because we won't know what the position for taxi drivers is in 12 months' time. How well they will recover, we don't know, because people are still quite wary about going into things like taxis or public transport. And I've got no idea how people will react as we come out of the pandemic over the next 6-9 months.
Thank you, Lindsay. Because Julia, what's the reduction in the number of drivers been over it's 12 months now, isn't it? The pandemic's been going. How severe is the drop?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got some numbers. The Hackney carriage vehicles have gone down by 18, private hire vehicles by 27.
From what figures?
So the Hackney carriage vehicles were about 86, now down to 71. No, sorry, 68. Every time I looked at records, I kept finding different figures. So private hire vehicles were down from 149, and now 126. Operators down from 40 to 36.
20%.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, and in fact, actually, the figures there basically aren't as bad as some of our neighbours. Actually, some of our neighbouring authorities. If I may just come back on the point that Councillor Ferris made, actually, I think it's a really important point. I mean, the trade are very important, obviously, for all sorts of reasons. I mean, the services that they provide around home to school transport, the services they provide in running those, vulnerable people around, and wheelchair users, and other, all sorts of groups of people in the community in general that are important in their ancillary status to the hospitality trade, to our, kind of working lives when people were using stations and things like that a lot more in normal times. So we are conscious of the fact that basically the trade do need to be supported in terms of through this period as we go into the hopefully what will be a cycle of economic reopening. But as I say earlier on, the fee that's before is the fee that basically is the fee that we believe as an authority, basically as a service, covers our costs. So the question is basically to the extent to which they wish to subsidise that. Going on to the second point that Councillor Ferris has made as well around the timing of all of this, I fully accept that point. We are going to have to look at the cycle of consultation within Wokingham as different to the other authorities that we've been involved with, simply because they are on a different fee setting cycle in that they set their fees in December. So we will go away and look at, as we go forward into this year and the fee setting cycle, as to how we bring that consultation with respect to Wokingham forward. I think there is also going to one final point on this, so that we will be looking at the fees, particularly in this area, more broadly this year, for all sorts of reasons. I mean, we're moving to a single system database, and as Councillor Ferris has suggested, we don't know whether Wokingham are necessarily going to be involved in that, but that would have an impact on fees, hopefully in the sense that it would make things a lot more efficient for the drivers and for operators and for the vehicle people who are licensed for vehicles purposes. But also, obviously, we've got a different base as well. We've got a different numbers base, as Julia has just outlined. So we would need to look at the fees in that context as well. I'm not suggesting that they would go up. I'm not suggesting that they would go down. But I think, given the changes within the trade, we are going to have a look at them more generally. Thank you.
We have, Sean, tried to help the drivers with suspensions and things like that. And,
yeah. I think within the law we've done what we can. I mean, Julia can say a little bit more about what we have been able to do. Well, we've effectively been able to, I suppose, suspend licences so they could take them off the road, vehicles, so they could save on costs and things like that. The law in this area is not particularly flexible because they're fixed period licences, for example, for vehicles. But we have done what we can to support them. I also go back to Councillor Ferris's point. I mean, I do know that this is a sector where there haven't been necessarily specific grants available. I mean, as you say, some may have been furloughed, some of them with premises may have been able to get some support around business rates and other support grants. And I don't know basically what the situation is with assistant ARG grants in Wokingham, or whether that's a route that basically the trade could go down. Basically in terms of making some applications in the view of the fact that they have been hit as being ancillary to things like hospitality. I mean, going forward, obviously we hope, we all hope that basically there is a better time coming for the trade, as businesses start to open up, but I suspect some things will perhaps never go back to the way they were in terms of the mass commutes to London and so forth. And it could be some time before confidence returns in some of the sectors as well. So I think there is a big piece of work as well that the service and the council need to do basically in trying to create that confidence as well as we go forward. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sean. Then we come to Barry now. Good evening, Barry. Barry, are you there?
Yes, sorry, I was just switching on. Yes, this concerns me to a certain extent in what we're talking about now, because we seem to have had a very, very small response from the people out there, the drivers out there and so forth, in not enough to really make a judgment on with regards to that. But at the same time, as you mentioned earlier, we're recovering our costs with regards to this. So anything that we take off of this it is effectively reducing the income to the council. And if we applied this approach right across the board, and all of the organisations that we're involved with, that could be quite a large amount of money that we're talking about, bearing in mind that we're losing a lot of money for all of the things that we've actually had to deal with there. So I feel not in the position to say that we should reduce things. I think that if we're going to have a review of all this later on with regards to that, I think we ought to sort of take account of it at that time now. But to try and make judgments when we're in the whole COVID situation where people are losing money all over the place and everywhere, leaping to a conclusion that we should reduce things all over the place doesn't make sense to me. We've got to work it logically. And if I thought that a number of, well, even a reasonably higher percentage of drivers had actually responded to it, I might be more sympathetic. But at the moment, I see all sorts of people and places and companies around the whole borough that need support, and we can't do all of that on. It's the electors' money that we're actually spending in terms of doing these things like that. And is this really the right way of doing it? Thank you.
I think it's a good point, and there are other businesses who have to pay licensing fees as well, and we have not considered subsidising them, and their licenses have gone up as well. I don't know whether they've suffered as much as the taxi drivers, possibly not, but that is something that ought to be taken into account, because their licenses, about dog boarders, for example, are set to cover costs. Rachel, I think you want to speak again, Rachel.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on a couple of...
I acknowledge your proposal, and I think it was seconded by Sarah, I guess.
Yeah. So just to come back on a couple of points. So to Sean's point, Sean's of course correct that only an inflationary rise was agreed to the underlying fee at the last meeting. But of course, because there was a subsidy last year, in reality it is actually an increase of around £40, £42, whatever, for say a Hackney carriage. So that's around 16, 17%. And then to Barry's point about, about the consultation and the responses, I mean, those of us that are following the local press or have actually spoken to drivers are in no doubt about the difficulties that they're facing and have faced. And then just to be really clear on the proposal, so if we want to not apply any increase, we'd have to retain the subsidy that was provided in the current year, so in 2021, so that's around £40. And then there would be no inflationary increase. So effectively, the proposal would be the fees would be frozen at the level of the current year. That would, I understand, have to be a subsidy, as others have said, rather than actually a fee change. But also to Barry's point again, I think the numbers in terms of the council's budget wouldn't be material, I don't think, if you're talking about the number of taxi drivers and that kind of change. In terms of the overall council finances, I don't believe that would be material for the council, although obviously it would be material for the individuals concerned.
And the same applies to other people who have to pay licenses and other professions in the borough who have to pay professional fees, many of whom are in a great deal of trouble, and many who've gone completely out of business. We see the taxes here as a legitimate case, and I appreciate what you're trying to do, but there are other businesses at the same time which ought to be considered as well. And the council has done that with various schemes, some paid by the government, that they've gone out across the borough to lots of different enterprises in difficulties. Lindsay, your hand's still up. Did you want to come back? You're muted.
Yes, I do. I know the taxi drivers pretty well, and what they tend to do is they have a figurehead, who writes letters and represents them. And so it is quite possible that that third letter, Barry, could very well represent the group of the taxi drivers, because they do work that way and they have someone who will write it. They usually indicate the names. The last time they did it, they said they're written on behalf of, and the whole list of names of the taxi drivers was incorporated. I don't know whether they've done that this time, but that tends to be the way they do it, Barry. So the fact that there may not be lots of responses, it's the way they combine it, and they do very much work that way. Regarding this issue, I think that the point, and I think Sean picked it up, is that where there has been financial support from the government, and I think the council has actually done very well with the grants that's come in. I think there was 9 different grants from the last figure I had from John Kaiser. We have put out quite a lot of money, and there's now been quite a bit of discretionary awards, but you still have to be a valid business. But it has been said that there's about 3 million people in the self-employed bracket who've almost completely missed out. And I think that a significant number of the taxi drivers fall into that category. Some have been furloughed. It all depends upon how they are registered, how they work. The one company I was talking to, they were formerly employed, so they were furloughed off, and so they actually did get some money. But others who are more standalone situation have not had a bean. And I think that's the issue that we have here. Now, I don't know, and I think it's the hospitality part of the community that has probably been hit the hardest. So there are going to be people who are like barmaids in pubs, and other people who work on casual basis or whatever, who probably are in the same situation. But they're not people who are paying a particular license. They may have had to get other means of support. But I think that I would be quite happy to widen this if necessary to find out the point that you're making. I have some sympathy what you're saying, Chris, in that we have to be fair. If we have got another part of the community where we have a significant increase in license fees coming through, who have been particularly hard hit, then I think we need to think about it, because we have to be pragmatic, because we may not be losing the increase in money and therefore it's losing that. If we have too much on someone, we lose the lot. We've seen that the Hackney numbers have gone from 86 down to 68, which is a 20% drop. Private hire has dropped less in percentage terms, but still quite a significant percentage. If by increasing it, we find that our 68 goes down to 55 and something else goes down to 110, the amount of money the council's got in is being reduced. So trying to get that extra bit more could end up being adverse. And I think that we really do need to think about it. And that's why I feel a freeze in the figures. We're not suggesting a reduction. And Rachel explained the position well. And I think that that is something that we should consider. And the fact that we have had 3 responses, but 1 referring to the whole group, again, it needs to be clarified. It is not unusual for how the taxi drivers work, and I've spoken to quite a few, but I have to say I haven't seen many recently because they haven't been there to speak to, and I think that is a really significant issue. They've probably had to put their car out of use, not do it, and they could very well be doing other jobs for we don't know. And that, I think, is a situation we have, and I think we do. And I would recommend that if Sean or Chris, you know those parts of the community that are in a similar position to taxi drivers, I think we should think about them as well.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Emma Hobbs, please. Good evening, Emma.
Good evening. Apologies. I agree with what most people are saying. But what I'd like to know, sorry, I've got a cat that keeps walking all over me. Herbie, bugger off.
Lindsay's dogs.
I think what I can understand where every single person is coming from on this, and my sympathy does go out to the taxi drivers. However, I would like to know how many taxi drivers have received some form of support from working in Borough Council before I agree with this and go with it. Because if a lot of the taxi companies have approached Wokingham and we have doled out money to them, I think it could be a different scenario. And I think that's something that we would have to ask John Kaiser if he would know, or could somebody else answer it?
Well, I don't know. Everybody know the answer there?
I mean, I don't know what Lindsay thinks of that.
Well, we need an officer response.
Yeah, or an officer.
General substitute to
John,
John, Chair, I don't obviously know basically how many have had some form of grant. I mean, clearly it's something that we can find out. I mean, what we do know is that basically, as Councillor Ferris has said, I mean, there were grants that were able to assist some of those within the taxi trade, but there weren't any really specific ones, I guess. So there will be people, I have no doubt, basically, that may have fallen through the various cracks in the various schemes that have been there. The 9 schemes, I think, as was mentioned earlier on, to date. What I don't know basically is how the council's applied things like assisted the ARG grant, basically, which is one of those kind of grant areas which can be used to support businesses that are affected ancillary to others. So that again is something I can go away and have a look at. And if there is bits of, if there is support still available basically to the trade, or basically available through the RG grant, then certainly we will get that message to the trade as we have done elsewhere, basically where grants like that have become available. So we have tried all the way through this to continue to message with the trade to try and offer some support and everything else. So I'll go away and have a look at that for the committee, and if there is anything that we can pass on to the trade, we will certainly do that as soon as possible.
Well, thanks very much for that, Sean. I think, you see, my thinking behind this is that, as Chris has said, there are quite a lot of other small businesses out there who are, again, as in a bad effect as the taxi companies. And, you can't do to one without doing to the others, I don't think, personally. But that's my own personal opinion. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emma. I see no more speakers. Can we just clarify, Rachel, what your?
So I just put my hand back up, Chris. Sorry.
I can't see your hand up.
Oh, I did put it up. It's doing
not my screen, but go ahead. It was up before, but
it's not like the full council meeting.
No, this happens at many meetings, planning committee as well, actually. Sorry, Rachel, I cut in there.
I've asked a number of taxi drivers that I have bumped into what sort of income are they getting compared to what they normally get, and they've all been around about 80% down. They've got a residual business. It's about 20% of what they normally get, and that was from people independently asking them. So I think that gives you an indication of where we're going. I think the point that Emma makes, and I think Chris said, is there is some issue there, which is why I said if there are other parts of the community that's missing. John Kaiser does have information as to the number of people or companies who have received money from the council in these areas, and some of them are quite large numbers. I'm quite happy for you to go and see if you can do that, but I think there are quite a lot of taxi drivers who are in this self-employed pseudo Uber arrangement where they normally work for someone but they're not really working, and it's all sort of, you know what it's like. And I don't think they've been eligible for anything. Another group I spoke to were people who work for a company, and that was the company they worked for, so therefore more like normal employment, and a number of them have been furloughed. but then they work for a company, and I don't know whether it's the company that pays the license fee or whether it's, in that situation, they were mostly private hire that I spoke to in that category. So I think that I think we do need to have we've made a proposal, or there's been a proposed second, and I've agreed with it, that we should not increase it. So as Rachel described it, is what we should consider. I'm quite happy to have a look to see what the overall situation is, but I can assure you taxi drivers have been very badly hit. And if there are other areas within the licensing area where they have been quite badly affected, then I think we should certainly have something on the agenda of the next meeting for us to see what we can do at that point, because I do agree with the point that Emma and Chris has made. We have to be even-handed, or as even-handed as we can be, and if there are areas that we are missing that haven't received anything, then fine. But what tended to happen with the because John Kaiser and John Halls will give us quite a bit of briefing on this, is if somebody was a valid business and could be able to show that they had not been able to run, the discretionary element of the Woking Borough Council grants, which came in, they had quite a bit of flexibility. Quite a lot of people who contacted me in Twyford, who then went through into Simon Price and his team, managed to get something. So, but I don't know from the taxi drivers I've spoken to whether they managed to get anything, because they're in this sort of individual sort of type of basis, and not necessarily a formal company as such. That's my only comment I can make from my experience of the grants, Chris.
Okay, can I check with Sean? Do we have to make this decision this evening? So Lindsay's hinting that we might be able to get more information and perhaps consider other businesses whom we license.
Chair, is where a decision has been made by the committee to recommend some degree of subsidy in the past, of course, what we have done is applied that retrospectively in any case, so nobody has ever lost out as a result of a decision being taken a little bit further down the line. I mean, you don't have to make the decision today. We could go away and get that information, come back in, say, 3 or 4 weeks' time, and bring the decision back to the committee at that point. And I can perhaps work some figures up around the proposal as well that's before the committee, if that would help.
That would be more of a panoramic look at all the licenses and the hardship and the subsidies, whatever.
Yeah.
Across the board.
I mean, what we can do. So, I mean, what we are able to say is how many licenses of various types we've lost over the last few. Over the last 12 months, really, in the course of the pandemic. I guess with some of the stuff, and I can't remember which member made the point. I think it was again Councillor Ferry sort of saying he hadn't seen very many about, hadn't seen many taxis about, and of course there is an element here that some of this stuff we won't know till renewal whether people are actually still in the trade.
Okay.
You know, so there is that bit about basically knowing where we are in a few months' time. What I would hope is that basically over the next 2 or 3 months, basically we will start to get a much clearer picture of the extent of the effect on the trade, the long-term effect on the trade, because obviously some have stuck in, some of them basically may nominally be licensed, but may in real terms have all but kind of packed it in or gone on to other things. Some of them may come back as the trade, as various other sectors of the economy, particularly around hospitality, events, gatherings. Some return to workplaces and things like that, come back and travel, obviously airports. And of course, there are bits that have always been consistent, like home to school transport, which is a very important part of the role of taxis. So some of them will have had incomes around that as well.
Well, thank you, Sean. Let me come back to Rachel, because I just wonder whether, Rachel, you might be able to support an alternative that we look across the board at licenses
well,
bring it back again.
I take the point, obviously, about other licenses, but there's nothing to stop us looking at that in the future. I mean, the consultation before us tonight is about taxi drivers. And I think because I've already made a proposal and it has been seconded, I'd like to carry on with a vote on that.
No, that's absolutely fair enough. I wasn't going to drop it. I was trying to
Thank you.
negotiate. So let's hear from Malcolm. Malcolm, good evening.
Yes, good evening. There's lots of ideas and comments coming up here with various levels of support. I think we all understand the difficulty that the taxi drivers had. We've been told that a number of taxi drivers and private hire, whichever category they're in, have dropped down. My question is, what happens? Have they just stopped going out in their cars, or have they handed in their license to us? And if they hand in their license, what happens? Do we cash it in, the unused bit, or do we extend it for when they come back? What's the process? And does it involve any money exchanging hands if they stop running?
Julia, I think that's one for you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A bit of a mixture, Malcolm, to answer your query. So the vehicles have gone, so the licenses have expired now. Now, whether that's a mixture of natural wastage, if you like, if the vehicles have come up for renewal and they didn't want to renew them, so there might be a few of them. They
we would have lost some money on those not renewing anyway, wouldn't we? As a council, we would have lost their license.
If the license had just come up for expiry and the driver didn't want to extend them or renew them, then that will be no change in money. There may be occasions where the driver has decided that they don't want to continue anymore, in which case there would be full month refund available to them for that. And these numbers don't include the vehicles that were suspended during the pandemic, obviously while people couldn't drive. So that's another number that will be in the mix at some point. As Sean has said, though, that will very much depend on when things open up again and people start to have confidence and go out about again. And that's when hopefully we'll find out some real figures.
So the money goes both ways, really. If they opt out when they've already got a license, there's a refund of some sort. If they stay in business, we get the money, and if they stay in business and don't get the business to justify it, then they lose money. But there's money going in both directions anyway.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Right, I think we should come to Rachel's proposal. Are we quite clear what this is saying?
Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
So the proposal is that taxi and private hire fees for next year are retained at the level charged to the drivers for the current year. So that's including the subsidy provided this year and with no inflationary increase applied.
Okay, is that quite clear?
Does that include taxi carriage as well?
Yeah, taxi and hire, that's what I said, yeah.
I think the terminology, Chair, if I may, the terminology.
I just need to be very careful with our wording.
We need to be, yes, exactly, Chair. Sorry, we just need to be absolutely clear about the proposal that's before. So just to check, Councillor Burgess, what you're saying is taxi and private hire, basically vehicle fees is what we're talking about before the committee tonight. And so the proposal is that taxi private hire vehicle fees stay at this year's current levels, or taxi Hackney carriage vehicle fees stay at the current level, which is.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, right. I'm just wanted to be clear about that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think it was seconded by Sarah, was it? I think that's right.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Okay, can I see those members who wish to support that proposal from Rachel? Okay, anybody butt in if you can't get your hand up? I can see 3 votes there. Rachel, Sarah, and no, there's only 2 now. Have we finished? 3 votes. Okay. Can you lower your hands, please? You 3. Lindsay? Thank you. And those members who wish to vote against? I'm sure you're pressing your buttons very quickly, but they come up very slowly on the screen. Well, I've got 7 anyway, so that proposal is defeated. I'd like to propose that we bring back a report which shows what help licensing has given to all enterprises across the board. And is it appropriate for us to consider what the council generally has done for businesses who require licensing? Is that in order? Would that be in order?
I agree with that, Mr. Chairman. It's Emma here.
Yeah,
I do agree with that.
I'm just trying to find out whether it's in order for us to do that.
I think it is in order, because I think it's only fair that we look at everybody and not just taxes, because there are other people struggling.
Because it's a question of the officers.
Chair, I mean, what we could do is to bring back a report fairly quickly. So, I mean, we'll need a few weeks to just do a bit of research, but effectively come back and bring a report to the committee about the impact across the licensing trade, the license trade generally. So the numbers of license, what that looks like, and also we can do some research in the meantime about basically what support is available to them that may not have tapped into, particularly this sector. And what support has already been given to various aspects of the licensing trade. If that would assist the committee, we can bring that back, as we'll probably need a few weeks to do that, but we can go away and bring that back to the committee.
So that's including general subsidies or government grants?
Yes, government grants, yes, in terms of basically, so we can go away and make those inquiries about what aspects of the trade have been able to be assisted and whether there are some aspects of subsidy or support that basically haven't been accessed, in which case we will definitely bring that to the attention of the trade, basically about how they can make the relevant applications.
And if Luciana is going to tell me I've got to take a vote. Are you?
No, I was just going to say, Sean, that although you're saying to bring back a report quite quickly, that would probably fall into the further period where we wouldn't hold a meeting. Just to say,
I mean, the next committee is in June anyway, Chairman.
So when you're suggesting.
So by that stage, we will have hopefully had some degree of hospitality opening in April, a further hospitality opening in May. And we should start to get some idea basically of how many within the trade are staying in the trade for the time being, or staying in there, or how many have come back, or how many other license holders we've lost in that period. So, I mean, that's what are we now basically. So we're only talking about probably about 10 weeks away, something of that order. I don't know the exact date, Luciane. Maybe we can help with that.
Yeah, the next scheduled meeting is the 23rd of June.
Okay. But in the meantime, we will go away and do some research about whether there are any grants that are available, and we will certainly get that information out to the trade.
Well, we need to resolve that first. I've proposed it. Would anyone like to second it? I've got 3 hands up here. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Is that Emma?
My hand isn't up to second. It's to ask a question. Just
yes.
To
okay, that's fine. So Emma, you seconded it, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Thank you, Emma. Right.
I've got.
Luciana, oh no! Wait a minute.
Before we vote, I think Sarah's got a question, and so have I.
Have a debate as long as you like. Yep, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. It was just to get clarification, because the next scheduled meeting that we've got is 23rd of June. Can I just check that by delaying the taxi licence issue, we're going to obviously move into the next financial year. So those that do renew their licence in that time will be paying the increased fee in the meantime. Can I just clarify that point, please?
Well, changes are retrospective. Sean, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be the case. I mean, what we did last time was obviously we refunded those that had already paid at the point where the decision was made, basically to obviously in the first year of the subsidy last time, we did refund all of those that had already made a payment. By the second year, obviously, we were able to bill the subsidy into the relevant billing at the time. So I think that would be right, Councillor Kerr, because the alternative to that would be to basically to charge a fee that hadn't been set or agreed, or agreement on subsidy. But I can see the point you're making, that effectively, basically, if they are struggling already, then basically the subsidy or retrospective refund isn't necessarily going to help them.
That's the point. So by having not voted to freeze it just now, we're actually going to be making it harder for some of them by actually charging that amount, which I mean, I appreciate that we're talking about, you know, discussing this in the greater context of things, and I do welcome us talking and discussing across other areas, but we are talking about taxis tonight. And by the time we discuss it, it might be too late for some, because they may have thought, well, we're not, you know, getting the support. We might lose even more in the process by doing that. And I mean, obviously everyone's entitled to vote how they wanted, but yeah, I think by pushing this back till June doesn't send a very clear, a very positive message that we're supporting them. Sorry to say.
Well, it would have to be decided, but we could hold fire on collecting the fees, couldn't we, for a couple of months till it's into the new financial year in some way?
Well, we'll be in the new financial year by then, so it would have to be beyond the financial year to freeze that. I mean, yeah, so I'll let the officer answer.
I was only going to say, I don't know, Lucianne, when PERDA starts. When would be the last date we could actually have a meeting?
29th of March, PERDA starts, I believe.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Can I butt in? I'm waving my hand, but no one's looking at me.
All right. Okay.
I have mine up as well.
Sorry.
May I?
Lumley, let the officer in maybe to clarify points.
Julia wants to speak. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say, we have been offering the ability to pay phased payments on all the licenses, so we could certainly offer that, you know, payments, so to alleviate some of the hardship, hopefully.
So phased in paying in retrospect, that would be, would it?
No, they pay something in advance, but they wouldn't have to pay it all in advance.
Like the council tax. Like the council tax, you can pay monthly.
Yeah, well, not quite monthly, but yeah,
Well,
we've been doing it sort of
10 months, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful, Lindsay.
Yeah. What I thought was going to happen, and I had my hand up, but you put your proposal, was when we had the discussion and we talked about the taxi drivers, and I raised the issue that I agree with the point that you were making and Emma was making, that we need to look at other areas that impacted. That what I thought we were going to do was to vote on the taxis to hold it and have a bit linked with it to say that we would recommend that we look at other areas that we need a similar wording. If you put the two together, then what would have been is that you could have done something for the taxis now and then had the allowance to go wider so that we could find out. And I'm sure we could find a special meeting of licensing somewhere. If it's not June the 23rd, maybe it can be after the 6th of May, but close enough to do that. And I think that it will look, I personally think it will look, from the council's perspective, not look very good that we got part of the community that's been really badly hit, because I don't think many of them have had much support and certainly not much business. And we then put in an increase in their licence fees. Whilst there's an issue that Julia's just raised about some staggering, the message that the taxi drivers will receive is that Woking Borough Council have put their licence in up, and as Rachel mentioned earlier, it isn't just the inflation bit, it's plus £40. So we're talking about, what, 56 or 70 pounds or whatever the figure is, and that doesn't look very good. And I think it gives the wrong message. And I would say that I don't know whether we can make a conjoined recommendation where we vote on the taxis to keep it in that, and then bring in and see whether there's other areas that we can treat fairly. And I think I don't disagree with Emma and Chris on this, but I don't know how long it's going to deal with it. And I think it's the message that we could give, that if we were to have given a freeze now on this area and then gone out to see what other areas we got, and then found that in 6 to 8 weeks time there was A, B and C areas that have been similarly impacted, then we could freeze in those areas. I'd like to know how we can go about that and recover the situation, because I think we're making a mistake as a licensing committee.
Well, that's fair enough, but the original motion, Rachel's motion, was lost. And
Well, I'm
I appreciate you want to do
suggesting
something different.
a conjoined one, a proposal, which is that we look at the licensing one and then absolutely link in to anything else that we can find to bring in that question of fairness. Otherwise, you're going to give the message out there that we've just put the fees up, and whilst there's maybe some help of doing it on a short basis, it'll get through the taxi community that we put the fees up. They don't bloody care about us, and etc., and that we will end up losing even more taxi drivers. So when we come to needing them at some point, it's going to take a while to get some of it back. Am I allowed to do that, or is that vote now killed?
I have a proposal which we need to debate and either support or not, and then we could come to
because I think a lot of your group voted because they thought we were only dealing with the taxi drivers, which is the thing that's on the agenda. But if we had it linked with the fact that we would do that, and then we would link it to the wider point that both Emma and yourself raised, that we need to look at those areas to see that also who's been impacted. And I don't know which areas. It feels like hospitality is one of those areas. As to what to do. So if we did a combined one, would that be a new vote?
Yeah, but we're not there yet. I want to get this motion dealt with first.
Could it not be an amendment to what you proposed, Chris?
You want to put an amendment in to add to the motion what we've voted down? That doesn't seem to make much sense.
No, I think what Lindsay's suggesting is amending your proposal.
Yes, I know it is, but if we amend it to say we will freeze the fees for the drivers, that is what we've just voted down. I don't see how can you put that in?
That's why I was asking if it was allowed.
But I don't think it makes much logical sense.
Chris,
Luciana, are you able to comment?
I don't want to get a legal question on this, but it doesn't seem to make. Sorry, who's speaking?
It's Emma here. Am I allowed?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Lindsay, I absolutely agree with what you and Rachel and Sarah are saying, and I can fully appreciate where you're coming from. The only issue is if we say we're going to freeze, I know we've had the vote, but if we say we're going to freeze the taxi drivers, trust me, word of mouth will go round like wildfire to every other organisation that has a licence, including kebab vans and everything, and we'll have anarchy, absolute anarchy. What have the taxi drivers got that we don't have? We've been hit by coronavirus as well. We've been hit by less people coming, etc., and it will cause absolute anarchy. And I think what Chris is suggesting, and I know it's not nice, but you can't suddenly say to taxi drivers, oh, you're going to have a freeze on your money, but in 2 months' time we're increasing it because it was voted that it was going to be increased, because they won't pay. I think this monthly payment is quite a clever way, because if it is voted in June and sorted out by the licensing committee in June, you quit in, because then the standing order people just say, hypothetically, you paid up for this year. I think we've got to be very, very careful.
The converse, Emma, is that the message gets out that Woking and Borough Council is going to put your licensing fees up, and the kebab bands will start going, oh my God, we're being hit as well. Whoa. It's the reverse.
Okay, I'd like, see no more speakers, so I'd like to go to the vote. So I have proposed that we have a general review. I think, is it, officers, clear what the proposal is? To bring back to the June, it'll be the June meeting, I think. Officers, Julia, okay with
that? I think what I've heard is that we come back with a report on the wider impact on all aspects of the trade. I mean, I guess the ones that you're particularly interested in are the ones, well, I guess all aspects, but obviously the ones where there are discretionary fees are obviously, so there are a number of aspects of the trade where effectively the council don't set the fees, and the fees are basically those set by government. But we can come back with an overall picture of the impact generally, which covers everything from taxis to kebab vans to gambling establishments to licensed establishments and other areas. I'll also come back with some information about what grants have been available, what the take-up of those grants were, and feed that back into the committee.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So if that's what's been proposed, Chairman, I'll do that. Yeah.
Luciana, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think I got everything.
Could I have a seconder for my proposal, please?
Yeah, I'd like to second it, please. Be my last licensing meeting.
Michael Furniture as well, but okay, Emma, you got in first. So can I see those who wish to support that proposal, please? I've got 9 members supporting that. Thank you. If you lower your hands, those, just wait for the hands to go down on my screen. Yeah, those against, please. I'm not getting anybody. Is it
9 to full complement?
Nobody voting against. Okay, so that proposal is carried. I think that ends this agenda item. I think we determined well, we didn't come to a conclusion, so we've postponed the decision till June. Okay, are we happy with that? Thank you. So moving on to the last substantive item, which is item 25, which is wheelchair accessible vehicles. That's you, Sean.
I'll come off mute and come back on screen. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So this was a matter that was raised some time ago, actually 18 months plus ago, basically by the Hackney Carriage trade, about basically the condition that was inserted back in I think it was 2018 into licence conditions around basically a minimum height for headroom on wheelchair accessible vehicles. The trade came back with a proposal that should be reduced to 48 inches from the current existing condition, which I believe Julie will correct me is 52 inches. It's difficult because I'm on screen and trying to read the paper at the same time. And what this paper basically sets out is basically some of the background to that decision, some of the sources of information that basically may help inform a decision tonight as to whether you wish to make any adjustment to that condition. Because obviously now the condition is, I think it's more than a year out, you could revisit the condition, and basically a recommendation that based on the evidence that's in the report or the findings that's in the report, that basically the condition should stand. Now, I understand what the trade is saying in the sense of a 5-year transition was given, so it was 5 years until the vehicle naturally came up for renewal, basically, that the condition would be given. And obviously, basically, this is one of those situations where the trade also has at the moment, obviously, they are in the middle of the pandemic stuff and the fallout of that and the economics and effect on their businesses. So, I mean, it is a decision that could be revisited again in terms of the timescale. Basically before the end of the 5-year transition, if that's what the committee wants us to do. But the recommendation that is on the report tonight is that the existing condition should stand. That basically that there is still the case that was made for that condition is still a valid case and the condition should stand. So
it was 2023. Was that the?
Yeah, I think it was 2018. I mean, it was developed as a result of. I think there was a task group at the time. I wasn't heavily involved at the time, but I believe that some of the members on this committee were part of a task group that did look at this at the time.
Yeah, 2018 plus 5 equals 2023. Yeah, Bill.
All right, got myself there. Hold on a sec. Thank you. Yeah, I think at the time when all this was very hot topic, really the thing that the trade wanted was some clarity. It was a case that the fear was that they could go out and buy a vehicle that then turned out not to be suitable for the job that it's got to do. So with this, we came out with a clear understanding of what we were asking for in dimensions. And to me, what we came up with is what we should remain with. I see no reason to change. We extended the period with the 5 years. And it seems to me that that was the decision that was made, and that's the one we should stick with. I think the only thing that I can see that is the deciding factor is the fact that now they know what the dimensions are, which is what they didn't know in the first place.
Thank you, Bill. Rachel.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions and then a proposal. The questions were, are we clear that there is a wide variety of vehicles that are available that have this 54-inch height from floor to ceiling? The second question was the original recommendation, I believe, came from it was Disabled Persons Transport Advisory Committee, which is great, but that was 20 years ago. And I think their recommendation now has changed to 58 inches. So whether officers have considered that as a possible recommendation. So there's a couple of questions, and then a proposal that, you know, given that the level of liquidity that our taxi drivers are likely to have is probably severely depleted at the moment and would take a while to build up, I'd like to propose that we give an additional year, if we do agree this, an additional year to put that in, so it wouldn't be 2023 but 2024.
So if I could just pick those three up in turn. So I think the appendix to the report, Councillor Burgess, just gives some examples of vehicles that are compliant with the current condition. So there are a range that are purpose-built, which basically easily meet that condition. There are a number which are conversions that also meet that condition. The point about 58 inches, that is something that we can go away. I mean, we are going to be looking anyway at vehicle conditions in due course, and maybe that's something we can look at that time, based on the latest recommendation, if that's what it is, at 58 inches, and we can bring that back in as part of that wider consideration of vehicle conditions. As you can see from the photographs that are actually in the report, I mean, the current vehicle, I think the example that was in there was, I think, at about 54, 55 inches, and that does give quite a bit of clearance in any case. But we can certainly come back and look at that one. The other matter, the third matter about the extension, really obviously is a matter for the committee.
Yeah, could I just come back?
Yeah, sure.
I think the pictures could be useful. I think the pictures it's not the same person in the same vehicle. Well, it wouldn't be the same vehicle, would it? But I don't think it's a different person, so it's a little bit difficult to tell. But
no, I think it is. Can I just just clarify? I think Julia.
It is the same person.
Oh, okay. Apologies. Okay. All right. That's my mistake. And then on my proposal, do I have a seconder for that? Anyone second my proposal to give an extra year to put the changes in?
I will second that.
Lindsay, I don't know whether they speak or whether they want to second you.
Okay, I think Sarah seconded it. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. Okay, just to clarify on the 2023, which date actually is it in 2023? January the 1st?
So I guess it would have been 5 years from the condition being adopted, I would imagine, Chairman. Unless you know any different, Julia. So effectively, it would be.
I agree with you. It was the date of the members' decision, which is the September, I think, September 18.
I mean, you still have got the fallback in any case, obviously, that if the vehicle comes up for renewal before then effectively, basically, all the vehicle is renewed before then obviously they move to one of the new vehicles that's compliant with the new condition of 54 inches that was recommended, obviously, and agreed at the committee back in 2018. So I guess the recommendation of Councillor Burgess would be effectively just a straightforward 12 months in addition to the existing end transition date.
It's two and a half years now. It's quite a long time.
Yeah.
Malcolm?
Yes, I would agree with Bill. He and I were both involved, and several others, in a lot of measurement and options and so on with vehicles. The fact is that I think the figure is about 54 inches. The taxi drivers didn't like the old system at all because it named a particular make and model that they would have to buy. And And that's in some cases those particular named models are quite expensive. What they wanted was to meet the standards, which said you can get someone in a wheelchair sitting in comfort in a taxi, and they didn't want to have a particular make. So a lot of exercise and examples went into checking it, and we came out with a specific measurement as the most safe and wise decision. And that figure, I suspect, is probably still appropriate. And if we're going to be reviewing it in a big way when vehicles change over the next year or two, I think we ought to leave the current system with those current measurements and not change them now. We should keep the 2018 ones that we agreed for 5 years.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Let me come to Abdul. He hasn't spoken yet. Evening, Malcolm. Abdul, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to those 54 inches, if there were taxi drivers wants to buy a new electrical vehicle, which we are moving towards, does those new vehicle is already compliant? I mean, in other words, is that height enough? So if they buy a new vehicle, I don't want them to do work to it. So that was my question, whether Sean can help me with that.
Yeah. Yes, in relation to electric vehicles, there is mention this in the back of the report. I mean, we haven't done extensive research, but I mean, certainly the one that is mentioned in the back of the report, which was the Nissan one, which is a common one. Basically, I have said that that an electric vehicle that they produce could be converted, basically. To actually, and there is an example there in the report with a link as to basically, for example, a conversion company that will create a vehicle with a 58-inch headroom on an electric vehicle if that's what the trade wanted. But obviously, clearly, looking at this, that the range of vehicles at the moment is fairly limited. But the range of electric vehicles, I think, is fairly limited compared to non-electric vehicles in any case. Julia, have you got anything on that you want to add?
No, I did have a meeting last week with the energy team, and we were talking about electric vehicles. And I think it's widely recognised at the minute that there aren't many electric vehicles that would be wheelchair accessible vehicles. But certainly, as Sean said, we can look at this as part of our looking at the policy as a whole.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Lindsay.
Thank you. I was on the committee with Bill and Malcolm, and I absolutely agree that we need to keep consistency, because that was the point that was made very strongly. They needed to know what the situation would be. I think we have a strange time at the moment because of the pandemic, and I think it would make logical sense on this occasion to extend it by 1 year, because it gives a more time for people to have their existing vehicles, who probably have been lightly used this last year, to be able to take them forward for 1 more year. And I think that what we need to know is that I would have thought that the Equalities Act that's either in or whatever would start going into electric vehicle manufacturers to indicate that there is this sort of general requirement. So I think that there's a lobbying aspect required for electric vehicles, although I thought that the electric taxi cabs were compliant with the figure. So I would agree that we keep our current figure, because we had a really, it was not a very easy session, was it, when we were going through all of this and going around. I think we stick with the current guidelines, and I can live with it being extended for 1 year.
Okay, thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in the same position as Lindsay. I'm for an extension, but I'm also against the extension. I think one of the things we have to bear in mind at the moment, more and more disabled people are going to electric chairs, battery operated. The increase is immense, and those are actually quite a lot taller than a normal chair. And this, of course, this extra inches, whatever it is, I can't remember what the amount was. So looking at the 54 inches is quite a substantial amount. And I think we need to also take that into consideration if we extend for a year or if we don't, because more electric chairs are being bought. Just my idea.
Okay, thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think obviously I wasn't part of developing the policy on this, but obviously, yes, I would like to ensure that vehicles are accessible by those in wheelchairs and appreciate the policy. Obviously, if anything changes, anything new develops over time, it'd be good to reconsider if at an appropriate time. With regards to the extension, I do support the year's extension for a couple of reasons. Obviously, this obviously refers back to the previous agenda item we looked at. Taxis obviously aren't being used that much at the moment, so they have longer in their life. But also the electric vehicle point that's been raised and the lack of choice on the market at the moment, it actually, an extension means that there's more opportunity for more EVs that are wheelchair compliant to come onto the market in that time as well. So it gives that extra time for the taxi driver owners who are considering buying new, to give them that extra year to consider that as well. But no, definitely, I think we need to give them an extra year. I'm happy with the policy, but we need to give them more time.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Barry.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we seem to be talking about the taxi drivers all the time. I'm more concerned about the wheelchair owners and people that are using that. What we're essentially saying is that, you know, there's not necessarily going to be enough available because they're not going to be conforming to the conditions and so forth. As far as I'm concerned, I would not want to extend it. I'd like to make sure that we get as many vehicles out there that are able to look after wheelchair owners so I wouldn't want to support the 1 year extension.
Thank you. I agree with you there, Barry. I think 2.5 years is quite a long time. That's what remains of the period up to September 2023. Rachel.
Well, I would just say, to come back on that, you know, it would take a while to build up enough savings, wouldn't it, to replace a vehicle? That's what we're talking about, isn't it? So, you know, if you don't allow enough time for them to do that, they will have to give up the trade, and then we'll have even fewer taxi drivers to drive people around.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we go to the vote. Well, we have two things we have to consider. Should I take I'll take your proposal to extend the year first. I think that seems a lot more logical thing to do. And Sarah seconded you, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the proposal is to extend the period of grace, whatever you call it, from September 2023 to September 2024. So, but can those show who are in favour of that, please? Okay, I've got 3 hands up. That seems to be it. Okay, take your hands down, please, and those against, please show. Some 6. So that is defeated. So, so we now come on to the.
Mr. Chairman, I'm actually abstaining from this vote. I wouldn't normally abstain, but I think both sides have an idea, but I would like to record I am abstaining.
Okay, Luciana, if you can record that. Try and put my hand down.
Yep. Record it.
Thank you. So there are 3 options. One was to revert to the original. If I'm reading this right. Revert to the original policy, which was just didn't give any statistics at all. It just had to seat a person in a wheelchair. The second one is the present policy. And the third one was which we haven't really discussed, was a proposal to list the vehicles, which is obviously something that changes all the time. So just wondering how to do this. Sure.
Chair, the recommendation on there was to retain the existing policy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There were a number of options. The three options that you've talked about are, so one of them is the way that we used to do it, one of them is the way that we do it now, and one of them is the way that some authorities do it. So some authorities basically actually do have an approved list of vehicles, which meet the specifications. So, but the recommendation on the report is that you retain the policy that you've currently got that was worked up back in 2018.
Thank you, Sean. That's very succinct. Right. So basically, we'll vote on the status quo. So we just leave things as they are. Will those who wish to vote for the status quo, please show. Oh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's a majority. Okay, should I take those against? I suppose I'd better take your hands down. Those who want to vote against. Barry, you're voting against?
No, sorry, I don't realise it's not changing. I'm not voting on it. Sorry.
That's all right. Okay, so that is passed. So that concludes that agenda item, and we can move on to, I think it's the forward plan. Sure.
Obviously, we've got the additional item now to add to the forward plan for June, which obviously we will take away now. Julie, do you want to pick up the other matters that are on there, please?
Okay, no problem. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair and Sean. So coming up for the June committee, we've got the statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standard policy to come back to the committee for your input into before we go out to consultation. We've also got the draft gambling statement of principles, which is a 3-yearly review on the document for member consultation before we send it out to trade and other bodies for consultation. And we also have, as well as the additional report that we've now agreed tonight, the taxi liaison meeting update.
Okay, just to clarify a couple of things. I think we are in sync, are we not, for the gambling statement with Bracknell and West Berkshire?
That's correct, yes.
Yep. And the taxi liaison, we haven't had a taxi liaison meeting, but we are always open to a meeting if drivers wish to have one. But
yeah, the last request, we asked them if they wanted a meeting. We've never had anything back from them. But of course, if they would like to have a meeting, we're happy to do so.
It may well be, Chair, that obviously a number of them may have been not working at the time. So we will again, after this meeting, make the offer basically to have that meeting with them. And, because we do really want to have a discussion with them as well about the whole issue of recovery and everything else, and whether there's anything we can do, around that and to support them. So we will make that offer to the trade again.
Right. Okay. So I don't know whether you anticipate having that before the next committee meeting.
Yeah, we'll make the offer after this meeting. So we'll make contact with them and make the offer after this meeting.
And then the meeting to take place before the June meeting.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I can't see anybody's hand up. To the meeting. So thank you very much, members and officers. And good night. See you in June.
Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Thank you.
Good night, Chairman. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.